gentlemen, I am here today to talk to you guys about my plans moving forward for our budget and kind of how I balanced out the finishing school year's budget. In order to do so, I first took into consideration three of Sorsen and Goldsmith's consideration in their book, The Principal's Guide to School Budgeting. And those three considerations were to project and prioritize the budget, build in the budget, and to defend the budget. So first, to project and prioritize the budget, I broke up, that section into three goals, and those goals being my way of projecting future expenditures that may come or may occur in the finishing school year, and my way of prioritizing kind of why I moved money, where I moved money, and my explanation as to why I moved that money where I moved it. So my first goal was to make sure each account was balanced out into positive. So I wanted to make sure each account was out of the negative and into the positive. The second goal was to make sure each account had money to work with to finish out the school year. So I wanted to make sure that each account didn't just get put back to zero, but had a little bit of money left over in their account to finish out the school year. And then my last goal was to prioritize the money in a way where the core classes, so our math, English, science, reading, and social studies groups, so all of our department chairs in here, I'm sure you love to hear this. I made sure that your accounts in both the copies and instructional supply sections both had a little bit more money than some of the other classes to finish out the school year, because as we all know, that's what we're judged on as a school. That's where the first classes where everybody looks at when comparing us to other schools. So I want to make sure we're staying strong in those areas and that our budget reflects that. So from there, the next step was to build the budget. And when building the budget, I broke the budget up into two sections to kind of help myself better see the money. I broke it up into the instructional supplies section and a copy section. And looking at those two separately allowed me to kind of move money in a way that, again, allowed me to prioritize the core subjects. So the first thing I did was look at the copy section, and I moved money around in there. I had to take money from the school improvement account, the band copies account, the reading copies account, to cover the Spanish, science, and math copies accounts, because those three subjects were kind of in the negative largely there. So we moved money around and was able to get them back into the positive. I pulled additional funds, so I took $1,700 out of the principal supplies to pay for the 8th grade graduation, but I moved some additional funds from my principal supplies account to cover the balances of the social studies and English classes. Those accounts got pretty large, and it was just easier to take money out of my account to move and to help those two accounts, because it would have just been too much movement of money elsewhere to get those accounts back to the positive. So once doing that, I had to also pull an additional $470 from the instructional supplies account in order to cover the nutrition copies account, because that account really was in the negative big time. And that account brought up some concerns that I'll discuss later, and that account kind of woke me up to us making a plan moving forward to cut down the cost in copies. Then once I got all those accounts balanced out, and I made sure that every account in the copy section had at least $10, and that the core subjects all had at least $25 left in their account to finish out the school year. Moving to the instructional supply section, I did the same thing. I looked at the core subjects and looked where I had the most money and where I didn't have the most money, and I took money from the reading, social studies, nutrition, tech, and music sections, and moved that money around to balance out the rest of the accounts that were negative in that section. So once I got every account back in the positive, I moved additional money around in the bigger instructional supply accounts to see that every account had at least $20 in their account to finish out the school year. And I made sure that all the core subjects had as close to $50 in their account as I could get them to. I know there was two accounts that I had. One was $48 and I think $49, where they were that close to $50, but I wanted to make sure they had each of our core subjects had a little additional money to finish out the school year. Again, those are our priority. And it's not to say that band, music, art, Spanish, and classes like that aren't our priority, but those classes can find different ways to save a little bit money here at the end of the year. Whereas our core subjects, they got exams coming up, and I know there's gonna be money that they need to finish out the school year. So that was my initial thoughts there with moving money around. Now, as far as defending the budget, which is the last consideration that I took from Sorensen and Goldsmith, the first thing I said that we need to do is that we need to allot less money to our classes, our non-core classes. So for example, our art and band both did a great job saving money in the copies and instructional supply section. So if we can allot for them less money, they've shown they need less money to work with. So we can take their money and give some of that money to our core classes moving forward into next year, so they don't have to pull as much and be in the negative, and we don't have to do so much moving of money to get them back into the positive. I think the next thing that we really need to consider as an entire school is to move our school to Google Classroom. So forcing teachers and staff members to work from a Google Classroom standpoint will save us so much money. We spent $8,433 on copies this year. And that's to this point, and we still got a month left of school. So I think moving to Google Classroom will allow us to cut down that cost big time, because teachers will be and staff members will be allowed to post all their announcements in Google Classroom. They'll be able to post any homework assignments via Google Classroom. They'll be able to post any additional materials needed that they might use the money to print off. They can put that into the Google Classroom, and students will have access to that without them having to spend a bunch of money to make the copies for those materials. So I just think overall, moving our school to a Google Classroom will save us so much money. Now, in order to do so, I think we need to make sure that our technology plan is up to date and that we have a plan that's in set and money that's set aside to see to it that our school can be a Google Classroom. And another reason why I really want to move to Google Classroom, because according to the districtadministration.org, 70% of high school students have cell phones and have access to cell phones at home. So that's their own cell phone. So looking at that number and taking that number into consideration, 70% of our students can have access to everything that a teacher may copy out for them or may have to spend money on in instructional supplies to get to the students. They can just put it on Google Classroom, and the student will have access to that at home, wherever they travel to. They'll always have access to that. And then making sure our technology plan is up to date covers the other 30% of the students who may not have access to their own personal cell phone or a cell phone at home. We can make sure and see to it that we have technology like laptops or even iPads for them to take home and have access to that Google Classroom. So that's my spill. I think moving forward, there's ways that we can help our teachers feel less like they're doing a bad thing by spending money. And doing so, we can help them cut costs and allow them to be more efficient teachers in any type of way possible by cutting out concerns of spending money, when we can get to a Google Classroom type of atmosphere where teachers are just throwing all their materials and worrying about spending money on extra things. So that's my spiel on the budget. Now next is for me to take in consideration your guys' thoughts as stakeholders onto what we need to do moving forward, moving money around in accounts. If you think I need to move money back to certain situations, I want to take all that into consideration here, and would like to hear from you all on what your thoughts are for the school moving forward.